Cleveland, Ohio, 1900, the king of the auto industry. Not something that you hear very often. Cleveland, Ohio was the pioneer in the auto industry and dominated from 1896 to 1925. We had over 82 manufacturers of automobiles, all builders formerly of bicycles or carriages that converted to the automobile industry. Some of the names you may recognize, like Winton, White, Baker, Jordan, Chandler, Ford, Templar, Roubaix, and the beautiful Peerless. The very first automobile was sold in Cleveland in 1896 by Alexander Winton. This was bought by a fellow from Pennsylvania who came down specifically to pay Alexander Winton $3,000 for the first auto. This first sale might be earlier than one would imagine, but cars were being sold before the turn of the century. The term automobile was invented by a Cleveland newspaper reporter. The newspaper was called Our Cleveland Plain Dealer. Even the name had its origination in Cleveland. Probably the most famous of all the automobile manufacturers in Cleveland was one Alexander Winton. He had the largest automobile plant in all the world right here in Cleveland at the turn of the century. Winton started his company in 1897 with an investment of $200,000, a very large sum for its day. He had the first V8 engine, which men might appreciate. It was a very fast car. Early cars went up to 68 miles an hour. Quite a speed for so early in the 19th century. Winton would build 5 cars at a time using a tested pattern. Winton at one time interviewed Henry Ford, but felt he was not good enough. Interesting note in history, Henry Ford eventually put Alexander Winton out of business with mass production. Winton would test his cars by racing. One of the most famous was his Bullitt car, which was raced in 1902. He also had a sales office in New York City. Alexander Winton's net worth eventually grew to $4 to $5 million by 1926. Shortly before he died, his net worth was a mere $750,000. For you see, he did not want to mass produce his automobiles. Henry Ford, on the other hand, was becoming a multimillionaire through mass production. Another prestigious car in the Cleveland list was built by the White sewing machine, which later became the White Motor Company. There were 3 brothers that built the cars: Windsor, Rowland, and Walter. The Whites initially built the steam car, invented by the brilliant inventor and brother Rowland White. Wouldn't it be nice today to pull your car in the garage and fill it up with your hose? For that's what the Whites did. The steam car had gasoline backup and basically got all of 25 miles per gallon. Steam cars were built between 1900 and 1911 before the Whites eventually caved in and switched to gasoline. Here we see an early couple driving a White steamer in 1900. This was the 25th car built by the White Motor Company. Here we see a wonderful picture of the White steamer in 1902. Notice that the steering wheel is now a legitimate steering wheel, which replaced the old tiller. Our next picture is a shot of cars built by the Whites outside their White facility. Here we see a fellow by the name of Augustus Post, a New York banker, at the wheel of a 1904 White steamer. He was celebrating a successful endurance run which went all the way from New York to St. Louis. Going cross-country in an auto early on was quite a chore. Here we see a 1908 White steamer stuck in the mud, quite a common occurrence for the day. Even our president got involved. President William Howard Taft enjoyed a ride in a 1910 White steamer. With the president's ride, the White Motor Company's production extended significantly. Here we see a beautiful 1913 60 horsepower, 6-cylinder White steamer. At the time, the cost was $6,300. Our next is a wonderful shot of a line of Whites entering Yellowstone National Park. This was taken in 1918, and the cars were used to shuffle between a hotel and the park. Other Cleveland names in the automobile industry. Here we see a shot of John D. Rockefeller seated in a 1914 7-passenger Peerless. We even had an auto named for our city, the Cleveland, which was built between 1902 and 1904. Another popular model was the Chandler. Here we see a Chandler which was built in 1919. The Jordan was a most popular automobile and was quite interesting. It was many times built specifically for women of the day. This was a marketing ploy used by Ned Jordan to promote his automobile. The Jordan sold thousands of cars and was around from 1916 until 1931. We've seen so far a gasoline car, we've seen a steam car. We also had electric cars, and one of the most famous was built by Walter Baker. It was called the Baker. Here we see Mr. and Mrs. Thomas Edison early in the 19th century sitting in their Baker Electric. Seems natural that Edison, being in the electric business, would have an electric car. The Baker lasted between 1905 and 1920. Our next shot shows the Baker Electric racing at a Cleveland racetrack, an old horse racetrack, in 1909. The Baker is the roadster and is the white car in our picture. Sadly, Cleveland, Ohio pretty much lost the automobile industry to Detroit. One of the obvious reasons was that the Cleveland manufacturers did not want to mass produce their automobiles. Thus, it made them more expensive to the public. The public's thirst for the auto began to grow and grow, and this was recognized by both Henry Ford and Eli Olds, who converted their production to mass production. In spite of that, we owe a debt of gratitude to the early manufacturers of Cleveland automobiles. They were pioneers in every sense of the word. Many of them were hurt in the racing of the automobile, for there were no safety features. And at such speeds as 60 to 70 miles an hour, many accidents occurred. Cleveland, although losing the automobile industry, kept the support industry that went into building automobiles, such manufacturers as Fisher Auto Body and TRW. Similar to Millionaires Row, all good things must come to an end. This was true for the Cleveland dominance of the automobile industry. It is my hope that you've learned some things about Cleveland and this great early pioneering of the automobile, something that we take for granted today and probably never associate with our dear Cleveland, Ohio.